As a national online bookstore, Tusome Books honors and acknowledges the traditional and ancestral territories of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples across what is now known as Canada. We recognize the deep diversity and histories of Indigenous communities from coast to coast, including over 600 First Nations communities, the 4 Inuit Nunangat regions, Métis nations and settlements, Treaties 1 to 11, 25 modern treaties, and the many unceded territories that hold long-standing relationships with Indigenous peoples. We respect the enduring connections Indigenous peoples have to land, language, and story, and we recognize that storytelling has always been central to Indigenous ways of knowing and being. As a literary space, we are committed to uplifting Indigenous voices, honoring Indigenous authors and stories, and contributing to reconciliation through mindful reading, learning, and dialogue. We acknowledge the work ahead and aim to ensure our actions align with our words.
A bit about me. Got my MFA from the Ira Writers Workshop. My debut novel, Broughtupsy, right here, took me about 13 years from the original idea to having it actually be published. I also would not recommend that. That was an arduous journey, to say the least. But I will say that it taught me quite a lot about having the temperament to be a writer. I've quickly learned, just from also watching classmates from my MFA, having the talent and the idea isn't enough. You have to have endurance. So I will definitely credit this book for teaching me that. Yeah, so that's just a bit about me. Happy to answer any additional questions you may have as we're going along. But I think my first question is for you all. I'm very happy to just have this be an open conversation. I'm also happy to do a reading and then we have conversation. So my question there is, have folks gotten a chance to pick up their copy and give it a read? Yeah? Oh, thank you. I'll maybe do like a brief, sorry, my allergies are really bad this year, and so my eyes are freaking out for whatever reason. So maybe I'll do a brief reading for folks who have not gotten their chance to yet pick up a copy, and I hope you will. And then following the reading, I'm happy to either just open up for general questions, or I'm a babbler, so I can just keep talking until Valerie tells me to shut up. So we will do one of those. Okay. So this is the Canadian cover. Gorgeous, very bright. You literally cannot miss it. But I'll be reading from the US paperback copy, simply because this is the copy that I've marked up with, this is what I'm going to read. This is what I want. So by way of introduction to my novel, it is a queer diasporic story about two sisters trying to reconnect and find a way to be at peace with one another and also with themselves. So it's a mixture. It's like a coming home story. It's a coming of age story. It's a sexual awakening story. And it's also, the thing that I'm my proudest of this book is that it's the main character is an introvert, which is something that you don't see very often in literature. Literature tends to favor kind of very loud, very operatic main characters. And I wanted to make a space for folks who are also very internal, for good or bad reasons. So whenever you pick up your copy, I hope that rings true. And if it doesn't, let me know. I'm always interested to hear. Okay, so as any storyteller would, I'm going to begin at the beginning. So this is starting from the very first chapter. The year is 1996, and it's a Monday. My girlfriend Sarah and I walk through the hospital doors, up and around the large staircase as I recite the nurse's directions in my head. Take the hallway on the left, then another on the right, straight through the waiting room to a row of patient rooms, then turn. First door on the right. There he'll be. And there he is. My brother's hospital room smells like air conditioning and antiseptic and the musty stench of something decayed. I glance up at a far corner, afraid I'll see a muted TV showing black smoke gathering above green trees, like I saw the last time I was in a hospital, when I was 9 and my brother was declared dead. It's a long shot, the doctor says, rubbing his chin and handing over the forms, but we're running out of options. The illness is progressing quickly. It's worth taking a look. Daddy nods, signing the forms and handing them to me. He doesn't read them, doesn't need to read them. He's been signing forms and sending my brother Bryson and me for tests in hospitals since I was 10. The tests should have caught this. I flip through the pages and pages of fine print, trying to take it all in. Just sign, Daddy said, sounding tired. Through the shut door, I can hear Bryson coughing. Fever getting worse. Are you all of Bryson's next of kin? The doctor says. If there are other family members, it'd be ideal if we could test them too. I can't come, my older sister Tamika had said. She could and she should, but she won't. Because why? Because 10 years ago, my father packed up my family and flew us over the sea. My sister and brother and me. Daddy flew us first to Texas before finally making home here in Vancouver. I was 10 when we first left. Bryson was 2 and Tamika was 16. In my head, Tamika's still 16. Soon after we moved, Tamika left us abroad and went back home. All I know is that years passed with her in Kingston and us in Texas, then Canada, and Daddy calling her on the phone yelling. Back then, he was always yelling, calling her "Why idiot child for leaving." What about mommy? Tamika would sometimes say. Who is here to tend to her? Every time the line would fall into hard silence, just heavy sighs echoing until someone hung up. Our mother is dead, so Tamika stayed behind, shaking her head in a never-ending no. But now our brother is dying, and there's me wanting my big sister. What a idiot child. Signing the form, I press the pen against the paper so hard that it starts to rip. Our sister is in Kingston, delayed by a plane that will never land. I watch my brother through the small room window, his breathing shallow as he tosses in his sleep. I hope he's dreaming of his sister sprinting through the airport, of her waving down the plane with her voice rising and arms flailing as she throws her handbag, her suitcase, throws her whole body, doing whatever it takes to stop the plane so she can climb on and come to him. Great, the doctor says, watching me sign. My assistant will walk you to the lab to get the blood work started. Who knows? One of you might be carrying just the thing we need. A nurse enters Bryson's room, introducing herself with a curt smile as she replaces one of the pouches hanging over his bed. Inserting the new needle into his IV line, she squeezes the pouch to start the flow. Drip, drip, Bryson's blood goes. Drip, drip, like counting seconds, losing time. Um, so it doesn't end well for him. Um, And the reason that that matters is, like I mentioned in this opening section, our main character, Akua, has moved twice. She's moved from Jamaica to the US and the US to Canada. And through all of those moves, her brother was there with her. You know, he was her companion. He was her witness. In many ways, he was her living record. And now he's gone, right? So now who is she going to turn to when she says, "Do you remember that time? Do you remember the name of that thing?" There's no one. And so in that kind of multi-layered and profound grief, she's essentially spinning out, desperate for a new sense of grounding. And so she makes the decision to go back, to go home. She decides that she's going to reconnect with her estranged older sister, her only living sibling at this point, and to also find a way to kind of revive her connection to her first and most important home. "Why didn't you come?" I ask Tamika. She kisses the lacquered grain of Bryson's urn in a gentle hello. "His funeral," I say a little louder. "The hospital, all of it. Why didn't you come?" Pursing her lips, she's as quiet now as she was when we first left, when Daddy made all his plans for our first departure. He said we needed a new start, that it was what our mother wanted. Tamika asked him if he'd crawled into her grave and asked her himself. When Daddy came home with her US visas, Tamika barricaded herself in her bedroom. She was going to start sixth form right there at home like her and Mummy had planned. "Why?" Daddy yelled, threatening to break down the door. She wouldn't answer. All she did was slide her scholarship letter under her door day after day, the seal on the top waxy and bright. Hampton School for Girls. Our mother went to Hampton, so she was going too, and that was that. After a while, my father gave up banging and emptied the house around her, trying to smoke her out with silence. Tamika sucked the smoke in and turned it back on us all. For 10 years, all I knew of my sister was her voice through the phone. I thought our brother dying would be enough to bridge this distance I didn't understand. "Why didn't you come?" she murmurs. "All this time since you leave your father's house, and you never come look for me." I stare at her, head spinning as I open and shut my mouth as we continue down the road with the press and pause of traffic. We are sisters, not friends. Our shared blood means there is nothing here to earn, to covet, to lose. We will remain sisters no matter what happens, no matter what we do or don't say, or how many years we're apart. I want to scream in her face, but instead I clamp my lips against all my angry questions. You wanted me to come to you, but you left us. And for what? I chew the inside of my cheek. Tamika keeps driving, sighing with the relief of knowing I'm due no answers. My sister did not come to my brother's funeral. That's that. Thank you. Um, so that kind of gives you a little bit of insight into one of the main through lines of this novel, which is grief. Um, but thank you so much. But I wanted to approach grief from the many perspectives that make it such a complicated and such an overwhelming and also a very kind of like generative in its own way force, which is, you know, in this novel, Akua's kind of grappling with not just the grief of first losing her mother and then her brother, but also the grief of losing, that kind of lived connection to her home culture. Grief over kind of like losing, as we learn later in the novel that she's queer, losing the kind of social acceptance that comes with kind of, being what people expect, and kind of in a way, all of that kind of works together to result in a kind of internal and like a much more quiet sense of grief, which is a kind of like a loss on a firm grasp of her own sense of self. And so if nothing else, that more than anything is what she sets out to find, to seek, to kind of like establish a new connection with. Which, but in order to do that, that requires kind of being able to see and acknowledge and tackle all these other layers of grief that are complicating how she sees and understands and moves through the world. That's what I was aiming for. You might read it and say, nah, not there. And that is absolutely, your prerogative. You're right. One of the things that's been beautiful, but also really terrifying about this experience is that this novel isn't mine anymore. For 13 years, it lived in my notebooks on my hard drive. I had complete and utter control. No one else knew it. No one else knew it to like the full extent that I did, other than me. And through the act of publication, which is always what I've wanted, I'm not good at keeping a personal diary. Writing to myself, I'm just like, why am I doing this? I just get bored. So the goal was always to get the book published, but it's strange, it's very strange to feel this sense of separation now from this thing that was so integral to like the dailiness of my living for so long. And so what's made that kind of strange, awkward distance bearable, really, is being able to see how the book is landing with all of you, because now, the book doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the readers. It belongs to the world. And I hope it makes you laugh. I hope it, evokes whatever, kind of various feelings that it might. And if nothing else, I hope that it is a amicable companion for the few hours that you spend between its covers. So thank you to all of you for your interest in my work and for, again, making the time to log on to yet another virtual meeting. It means a lot, and it's not something that I take for granted.
Thanks, Christina. So I really like the way you started by talking about the layered or the different types of grief that you talk about in the book. And one of the ones that I think I was thinking of too is the grief of like the lost connection and the lost relationship between Aqua and Tamika.
Absolutely.
I think that they're still both alive, but then they kind of lost that sibling sisterhood relationship that Aqua fondly remembers throughout the book, right? Like from when they were much younger. Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that was one that stood out for me as well. Also, so I think I mentioned this to you while we were emailing back and forth, that we read this in the book hub at my bookstore a while ago now, about almost 2 months ago now. And so one of the things we talked about was, just the grief and how each person approaches or deals with their grief differently. There isn't just one way of doing that. So I guess I'm kind of curious to know about, your writing of grief. how you went about doing your research, what advised it, and like just the way you presented it in the book. If you can kind of give us a snapshot into that work.
For sure. Um, I've had, which happens when you're a writer, your friends, learn that you're publishing a book, and your friends and family rather, and their first question is, oh my God, am I in it? Like, am I a character in your book? And I'm like, first of all, bold of you to think so highly of yourself. I'm just gonna go ahead and call that out. And then second, I mean, how can you not be? Right? Like every writer, we are interesting creatures in the sense that we're always researching, by which I mean we're always kind of mining the contours of our experiences to find something that is resonant and true. And so when I kind of realized that this grief, right, and the many layers and complication of the grief was the kind of central engine of the novel, I just started talking to people, right? Like you know, through the course of writing this book, I lost my grandmother, who was like the matriarch of my family. Like she was like this, she just was like, she was the everything. She was the spine. She was the head and the spine, everything. And I remember talking with my cousins and even with my mother, and not just differences in how we were dealing with like the sadness that came with her passing, but also what really struck me was the differences in how we each remembered her. You know what I mean? It was almost to the point where I'm just like, did we all experience the same person? I'm not sure if we did, right? And so it's interesting, right? Grief is very particular. I've yet to meet this two people who are even grieving the same thing, who are experiencing it in the same way, right? And so that I was fascinated by that. And so that, what you pointed out earlier of kind of like the grief between Akua and Tamika, I wanted to explore that in the sense of kind of grieving someone who isn't yet dead, right? But essentially you're grieving the loss of the relationship, right? That is what no longer has life. But then also the ways in which grief can make us very territorial, because the person isn't there anymore. They're not able to make new memories or, have a renewed influence over your life. And so we kind of create these pastiches in our heads, made of all these moments, all these snapshots of memories, essentially. But then underneath that is an understanding that the only thing holding, right, this kind of like Frankenstein version of the person together is your imagination, is, all that is happening in the space within your head. And so it makes you very territorial in the sense that you become very insistent that the way that you remember that person is how that person was, period. But then how do you reconcile that when it's multiple members of a family grieving like a dear loved one, like a mother or like a brother, right? And so this experience that at once connects you to each other, which is this experience of loss, can also make you feel profoundly alone. And so much of my research was just simply talking to people, who had lost someone significant in their lives, and just learning more about how they carry that, because grief is not like being sick, where eventually you're better. Like it's just once you have that in you, it is your companion until you meet your end. And so just learning the multitude of ways that the people I had access to were carrying that within themselves, and then wanting to not exactly describe what they were going through, because that's impossible. You can't really capture the fullness of an experience through words, but I do think that you can evoke something very similar to it, right? If you are very careful and attentive to language. And so one of the things that I hope will stand out to you when you dive into Broughtupsy is like the real care and that went into kind of intentionally structuring each sentence in such a way that the kind of collective effect of all those words put together evokes the thing that it's trying to describe. I think that is one of the strongest aspects of literature, is not to like describe, but to evoke. And so yeah, that's kind of how I went about, because at first I tried like reading psychological articles about grief, and I was like, this is not helping me. Like, so that okay, the way that the synapses work in the brain, cool. Can't put that in a character, so yeah, just talking to folks and giving them space to feel heard for with all that they're carrying, and then with utmost respect, of course, and esteem, folding that into this world, this imaginative world that I was creating.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that response.
Of course.
Does anyone have a question? You're welcome to ask now.
You can ask me random things like, what's your favorite snack? Anyway, Jen.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say this is actually the very first author reading that I've ever attended. So I just want to say thank you, and I really appreciate it, Valerie. So thank you.
Oh,
I really like the book.
Thank you. Oh, that makes me really happy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. I think Joanne, you have a question?
Hi there. Yeah. I think this is my second reading. Valerie, and
you guys are killing me. Oh, I'm going to take it with me everywhere.
You're awesome. I really enjoy. I have just started the book. I think I'm about 3. I think I'm on Saturday. But definitely just comments that come to mind. You got me right at the beginning. The hospital walk was so, I mean, I've been there, and that it just immediately, you're immediately in that scene, and then it was, in that scenario, and in the character's mind in terms of what you're seeing and feeling and experiencing. Well done. It just grabbed me right in very viscerally.
Thank you.
Been in that situation. My question is really, so 13 years. Can you talk a little bit about why? Was it stumbling?
Absolutely.
Was it, I couldn't, you had a question you couldn't do? Did things get in the way?
Absolutely.
What were some of the blocks?
For sure. So it was a multitude of things. So I hope your schedule is open, because I'm going to be talking for a while.
Sorry, just before you dive in, Christina, for people who came in a few minutes after Christina mentioned that, they're talking about it took Christina 13 years to get the book published, right? Or just the right?
From ideation to it was physically in my hand, 13 years. Yeah. So the first obstacle that I had is that I had an idea for a really good book that I wasn't yet skilled enough to write. By which I mean, I had the original inspiration for this novel when I was 22. And when you're 22, you're full of vigor and, idealism, and but you're not very retrospective in your thinking, and you're not yet wise. And so much of what makes this book work is the kind of like panoramic aspect of the perspective in it, right? That you're in this character's mind, you're like, in her shoes, but the style of narration itself gestures to and opens up the world in such a way that you're able to kind of see and access the many layers of meaning. Now I know how to do that at 22. I barely even knew how to do my taxes at 22. It just was not going to happen. And also at that age, the idea of writing anything novel length, which is like many hundreds of pages, is terrifying. Like putting that much effort in, like I can't do that. So this novel actually started out as what I thought was a short story collection, because the notion of short stories as like little bite-sized microcosms, and if I just defeat each one individually, then I can string them together into a whole. And I first started writing it during my first master's degree. Yes, I have two. I am the child of Black immigrants. This is what happens. Not sure if you have any Black immigrants, in your life, or if you're also one, but the pressure to excel is it's strong. And I was doing my first master's at the University of New Brunswick, and Sue Sinclair, I'm not sure if anyone knows her, she's a poet and just like a lovely and kind human being. She was the writer in residence then, and she read a few of the stories from what I thought was my collection. And she was the first one to say, no, this is a novel. You're just not there yet. And I was like, you're foolish. So I finished what I thought was my short story collection. I graduated, and I was like, I did it. Check. Yay me. And then I moved to Vancouver, and I kept writing while, working various jobs. And I couldn't like Akua wouldn't leave my head. She kept, hanging out at the back of my consciousness, and she kept saying new things. I was like, I'm done with you. I did my collection. Why are you still here mumbling in my ear? Like, you're weird. Get out. And then eventually it came to a point where I couldn't ignore her anymore. And so I started writing what I thought was a sequel that would be a standalone novel featuring the same characters, but they are older. I started writing that. I became completely engrossed in it. And then I realized I can't work a job that pays my bills and write at the same time. So that's what led to me applying to fully funded MFA programs. And I got into Iowa with a fellowship. And so I went there, kept writing, again, thought I was writing a separate novel because now I'm older and I'm a real grown-up. So I'm gonna do the hard thing. Finished a draft of the novel and was just like, okay, I have 2 projects now, let me polish them so I can start finding an agent. I went back and I read the short story collection, and then I read what I drafted of the novel, and that's when it finally hit me. I was like, these are 2 parts of the same whole. The story collection is beautiful, but doesn't really have it doesn't have stakes without the novel. And the novel has stakes, but it has no resonance or meaning without the story collection. And so what I eventually came to realize was that the short story collection, those are now all of the flashback scenes within the novel, and the present action, that's what I drafted as my second project when I was at Iowa. And that was humbling to realize that I'd been endeavoring for so long on what was essentially a singular project. But I think a lot of it is that through the act of pushing myself and to really do something that is artistically difficult, it helped me mature. It made me become like a better thinker, definitely a better writer. And it also I was kind of building the plane while flying it. So I was teaching myself how to write a novel while writing a novel. And so what I realized too was that I needed to be 22 years old in order to capture the kind of visceral truth of those flashback sections. But then I needed to be in my 30s to be able to look at the whole and be able to like stitch it all together into a shape that would make sense to somebody other than me. So I'm not sure if the book could have come together any faster than it did and have all of the qualities and aspects that it currently has. So yeah, and then part of that too was also it took four years to find a publisher, because traditional publishing is flawed. That's a separate conversation. But I used to have a lot of like guilt and shame around why it took me so long. And I've since let that go. Because sure, it was a long time, but it resulted in like a debut that I'm like immensely proud of. And I've also heard from other writers, that I've become friends with through the process of publication, who have spent 16 years, 23 years on a single project. 23 years, that is excessive. I'm not sure I could do that. Like that is, I don't know. I think my cutoff is 15. After that, I'm just like, well, moving on. But yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. I think that I'm so excited now to finish the book and think about how it all came together. It just reminds me of a lot of an artist's practice, right? Like a visual artist, and they'll often start the painting and they'll sort of be finished, but they can't quite let it go, and they go be years, and anyway, all of you wonderful creative people, thank you.
Thank you so much.
The book I'm currently reading, it's called Women Who Run with Wolves. The author took 16 years to write it.
There you go.
Yeah. Do you want to do another reading or talk about something else you have, or do you want us to ask you more questions?
Sure. I mean, I have another section that I could read, but do you want to, while I find it,
yeah,
someone want to ask me something real quick?
For sure. If no one else has a question, also remember, if you're not comfortable talking, you can always put them in the chat, and I'll just read them out to Christina. But my question to you, Christina, which I'm kind of reluctant to ask because it does come up in the book, what is Broughtupsy?
So Broughtupsy is a Jamaican term. Oh, no, wait, that just got, if anyone here is from the other Caribbean islands, I'm so sorry. Please don't kill me. It is a Caribbean term, please don't kill me, that refers to essentially having good home training, having good manners, right? So the way that I often describe it is that it refers to how you are brought up, Broughtupsy. I chose it as the title because, at least in Jamaica, okay, no one else get mad, it is often used in a negative manner, to say, oh, someone have no good Broughtupsy, saying that they have bad home training, that they have bad manners. But interestingly, it is almost exclusively only used on girls and women to refer to that they have bad manners, they have bad training, which essentially it's like a way of policing gender. And so I wanted to kind of subvert that or play with that by having it kind of by centering it on a queer Jamaican, and having it kind of reflect her kind of blossoming of her kind of, kind of growing into the goodness of herself and really claiming that through her Broughtupsy. So that's how the title came to be. All right. So I'm going to read one more little section. So I just mentioned that the book is queer, which for those who have not yet dived in, you might, but did hear my earlier reading, you might be like, where's the queer content? She just sounds like a regular girl to me. Well, here it is. So this is in the latter portion of the novel. It is Friday. It's 10 p.m. The club reeks of sweet excess. There's a stage, a red-lit stage, lights shining on, then off, over gold-painted walls and poles shining silver. I squeeze my way through the crowd, music booming through the feral haze of bodies pressed close. Shoulders tense, I suck my stomach in to make myself smaller, closing myself in against the crowd, toasting and whining to the beat. This club is more raucous, more unruly than anywhere I've ever been. Arms pressed into my sides, I sorry and excuse my way through the pulsing throng. Jada walks out on stage, the rhinestones in her bra sparkling in the gold-colored light. She drops into a split, ass bouncing in front of the club packed with people, so many people. All of them are just squeeze up and wind up, filthy and alive. Excuse, a man says, squeezing behind me. He drags his hand along the small of my back, fingers creeping beneath my shirt. Body tensing, I turn around. He notices me and comes back. I'm terrified, but I drop my gaze and smile. I make him think I like it. Be good, Jada said. So I cave in. I make my body small. He looks down at the top of my head and smirks. I take his wrist and lead him to the stage. Brap, brap, the bartender yells. Brap, brap, with his forefinger and thumb pointed at the ceiling as the man slides his hands over my shoulders and down my back. The DJ switches to a heavy dancehall beat, dotted bass gravitating on the snare as I bring him to her. I bring him to Jada twirling slow around the thick pole. He sits down, then looks at me and pats his lap. Smiling, I shake my head no and couch on the stool next to his. Jada squats down in front of us, legs spread wide as I rest my hand on his thigh. Are you a big man? I press my shoulder into his chest. Are you a real man? He pulls out a roll of bills and I laugh. Jada turns and kneels and I can't believe that worked, so I laugh as she makes her ass dance in front of his face. Taking a bill, I slide it up Jada's thigh and over the smooth swell of her hip, plucking the thin string of her thong and letting it snap against her skin. He leans back and hands me another bill. He tells me to do it again. Jada looks over her shoulder at me as I slide the bill down her back, dragging my nails along her skin, and I glance at him. Is this what you want? I reach the soft dip between her cheeks and I drag the bill down, like this. kneading her ass with my thumb, and he takes my hands, then shoves the bell into her thong, impatient and rough. In one smooth twirl, Jada turns around, sweat pooling between her breasts, and looks him over, taking in his tight shirt and young face and hand still smooth as new glass. He looks fresh to the scene, like he's enjoying his first big night. She glances at me and smirks. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, she makes as though she's about to leave. The dance hall booms down to my bones as I take my hand off his thigh and follow her lead. He pulls out 4 crisp bills. Jada grins and drops back down as I rest my hand on his chest. He takes a full shot glass from a waitress, then squeezes it between her breasts. Mouth open, he leans forward as my feet turn cold and my hands start to burn, so grinning, I shove him back in his seat and plop my ass on his lap. Jada watches him as I lean forward and close my lips around the cool glass. Laughing, he rubs my back and throws the bills at Jada's feet. He's enjoying it. So she grabs me by the throat, yanking the glass from my mouth, and she kisses me. Brap, brap, she traces my lips with her tongue, and I hear people cheer. I hear the man behind me yell, "Go de gal," as bills flutter against the back of my neck. "Good girl," Jada murmurs as she presses her palm against my face, then shoves me away. I'll stop there. Yeah, so hopefully that was enticing. I won't give away too much about where the scene goes from there, but so Jada was one of my favorite characters to write. She's a queer woman who's living in Jamaica, and she just takes no shit. She's just such, like, she's so, like, she's so strong. Has so much presence. She told me what to write about her. You know, she was just she was a real gift. She came to me fully formed, and all I had to do was simply commit her to the page. So she was a lot of fun. You know, I really, you know, tried to add many layers to the queer content, as you'll see when you dive in. Yes, there is a lot of risk, but there's also a lot of joy. So, and I like that scene because it's joyful in the way that it plays with what men expect, right? So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I also enjoyed just the whole relationship between Jada and, or I guess the connection or whatever happened there. I really enjoyed that storyline for sure. I was gonna say, I imagine that writing, you know, about queer relationships in Jamaica, you probably got some pushback, or like, I'm just wondering what the reception was and how.
For sure.
What have you had?
I mean, it's been interesting. Interesting in the sense that at first, all of the newspapers in Jamaica paid me no mind. You know, it's as if my book didn't happen. But one thing that's been like beautifully blossoming in Jamaica is that queer culture isn't completely underground anymore. You know, there's now a Pride Week in Jamaica put on by an organization called J Flag, which they're like actual doing business as name is the Equality for All Foundation. And they've been in operation now for many years, and they have been growing, you know, partnering with various groups in the US, partnering with groups in the UK, and there's been other islands in the Caribbean that also do Pride that they've begun to partner with as well. And so they brought me in as part of Pride Week to do like a fiction hour. And it was so sweet. It was it was like everyone was so attentive, you know, they really read the book and were ready. Which, I mean, if nothing else, more than any other demographic of Jamaican, those are the ones whose affirmation I most wanted. And so it's been very sweet to see the ways in which my book, even though mainstream media in the Caribbean is like, what book? That they have discovered it on their own and are very much making it a part of their experience. And I was also invited to the Bocas Lit Fest, which is the largest Caribbean literature festival in the actual Caribbean itself. I couldn't go for various reasons having to do with the current climate in the US, and traveling is not fun right now. But that was also a huge sign to me that there is a kind of critical mass of Caribbean folk who like know about my book and appreciate my book, that they would then extend an invitation for me to come back, for me to come home, and to read from it and to talk about it. And so the reception has been slow, you know, like it wasn't immediately picked up, but it's growing. And so that just makes me, it just makes me so happy, you know? Yeah.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think the most obvious question that I'm sure every reader asks of every author is there another book coming?
Oh man. There, you know, after 13 years, I was very tired. You know, I was just like, I'd like to not think about verbs for a while. So I didn't write at all from when my book first came out in January last year. And I'll say, it's only been the past month that I've started to feel restless in this way, because, you know, before publication, I wrote every day. So I have some ideas, but I'm not rushing myself, you know, because I have friends who are further along in their careers, and the number one piece of advice that they all give is, if you force it, you'll just burn yourself out on wasted pages. So I have the idea. I'm slowly starting to get the itch, and then hopefully my goal is by the end of this year that I'll be writing again. So stay tuned. Hopefully it won't take another decade. You know, if this one can come out in 5 years, I will be thrilled. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're rooting for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You can get Christina's book from Tusome Books, so tusomebooks.com.